You're one of the most published cardiologists in the world.
Yeah, and certainly the most published on this whole clinical aspect of COVID. That virus that you got was straight out of that lab.
Wuhan.
It was straight out of that lab. You know, the vaccines didn't save a single life. This is the new power game in the world. You hold the threat that can get the whole world sick, and you hold the antidote, you hold power.
Who decides, hey, you know what, the world needs a new pandemic?
The government cannot determine our medical destiny.
What can we do in order for medicine not to be a business anymore?
A healthy child born today is healthier if they take no vaccines whatsoever. None.
Dr. McCullough, how are you?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. You know, you are one of the world-renowned cardiologists, and besides that, you are the most interesting man on Joe Rogan. Elon Musk might be wealthier than you, but you are more interesting because your podcast was one of the most viewed podcasts on Rogan. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, I have a new book out, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. And Joe Rogan wrote one of the last comments on the very back at the bottom.
Dr. Peter McCullough was right all along. Very nice.
There you go. Short and sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you were you not?
Well, you give Joe Rogan credit. Now, when Joe had me on, we were actually 2 years into the pandemic.
Yeah.
If you ever had me on again, I'd say, Joe, we made such a big hit, but you were pretty late on this. It's pretty late. Even when Tucker Carlson had me on, he was 18 months late. So let me tell you, in 2020, I don't know what you were doing, Joe. Were you doing very many podcasts trying to figure out what's going on?
No, but I was watching those podcasts to figure out what's going on with
But in
COVID.
2020, there was almost none. It was interesting. In medicine, the grand rounds shut down. Everything shut down. I was at a hospital. We were told not more than 10 people could get into a room. So we actually couldn't even talk to each other. So I think losing the ability to talk like this in 2020 shut things down. And even podcasters like Joe Rogan, they were about 2 years late. Can you imagine how hot the podcast would have been in January of 2020?
Absolutely. But people were always skeptical from day one.
Some were.
Yeah, the government was instilling such fear into people and making sure that everybody complied. But people like you started questioning it. And that planted seeds into people's heads that, you know what, this guy must be right. He has a point. And then you went on to Joe Rogan.
Well, listen, were you yourself afraid?
You know what? I was, but I have a reason why. I mean, in the beginning, I wasn't. And then I was because I got COVID and I almost died.
Okay, well, that's a reason to get afraid.
Exactly. And I didn't want to go to the hospital. My wife, actually was the one who made me go to the hospital. I wasn't going to go to the hospital. I was in our house. I was quarantined in one of our bedrooms. She would just bring in my food, my water, my medication, and she would constantly say, hey, you need to go. You need to go. You need to go. And before that, there was a reason why she was constantly saying that is because I had AFib. I had AFib, and I had a terrible AFib. I had an ablation done. The ablation was unsuccessful. So at the end, they had to shock me. I'm like, then why didn't you just shock me in the beginning? So my temperature, my fever was not going down. I had fever continuously for like 8 days. Okay.
Now, what month and year was this?
This is end of 2019. Or beginning of 2020, if I believe.
If
I remember.
This is the real Wuhan strain.
Exactly.
This is the most severe strain.
Exactly. This was the most severe strain that I got. Okay. Anyway, she literally made me go to the hospital. My oxygen level was at 80%. They couldn't figure out what to do. They almost wanted to put me on a ventilator because that's what was popular.
Now, hold on. Your oxygen saturation, 80%.
Yes.
But were you short of breath?
Was I short of breath? I was.
Could you talk, or did you feel like you were running a marathon?
No, it was very difficult to talk. It was very difficult to talk. I was on 13 liters of O2, I believe, or 10 liters of O2, continuous nasal cannula.
Because one of the observations we made through this is, and the Italians broke the story about May of 2020 when they courageously did the first autopsies. I was in pathology once a week as my duties, and we shut down the pathology lab. We were afraid to do an autopsy. We thought we would somehow get this virus. But the Italians did an autopsy, and when people died, they didn't die of a pneumonia. It wasn't the lungs weren't full of fluid.
Hmm.
They were filled with little blood clots.
Interesting.
And so the low oxygen saturation that occurs with blood clots, that's called a diffusion gradient, or what's called a VQ mismatch, a ventilation perfusion mismatch. It creates a low oxygen saturation that's out of proportion to the work of breathing. And so there's 3 papers now published on this, that what we can do is what's called permissive hypoxemia. Let the oxygen saturation go down, provided the work of breathing is acceptable and the mentation is acceptable. So I had, later in 2020, I had a doctor and her husband who we started seeing people die in the hospital. And you got the message.
Where were you at the time?
I was in Dallas at the time.
You were in Dallas.
And she says, Dr. McCullough, we're not going to the hospital. And so we did everything. Now, this was beyond November, so we had monoclonal antibodies. We did McCullough protocol, which was the whole story of the McCullough protocol is in my first book, Courage to Face COVID-19. So we did everything. Monoclonal antibodies, all the nutraceuticals and supplements, ivermectin, secondary antibiotics, corticosteroids, home oxygen, blood thinners, because I knew blood clots were forming in the lungs, and the oxygen saturation for both her and her husband got into the 70s at home. And I would talk to them, say, well, we're pretty short of breath, but we're holding up. And I said, well, how are you doing in terms of thinking? Well, we're still clear in our thinking. And they said, we're going into the oxygen saturations in the 60s when we, go to get something to eat in the kitchen and what have you, exert ourselves a little bit. I said, well, just hang on. You know, when you get to the point where you can't manage the work of breathing, that's the time to hit the panic button. But I said, when you go into the hospital, for sure you will go on the ventilator. For sure. That's going to happen. And this lasted about 3 to 4 weeks, and they pulled out of it. Later on, I went to a symposium, and we reunited and saw each other. And there's 3 papers now published on this. The key was to use ivermectin. Ivermectin helped unhook these red blood cells that were stacking together. It's a process called rouleau formation. Probably it's early 2020, did you get any ivermectin?
I have no clue.
Did you get any at home? Do you have any hydroxychloroquine at home?
No, I did not.
What did you have at home to treat?
Ibuprofen,
That's it.
Motrin, Tylenol,
So what
things
the
like this.
what the published
Very
analysis,
generic drugs, yeah.
Joe, what the published analyses show is the only people who ended up going to the hospital, it's not your fault, is they didn't get early home treatment.
Mm.
And once we developed early home treatment protocols, so the McCullough protocol was published in the American Journal of Medicine in August of 2020. It became the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons official treatment protocol by October of 2020. Now, the analyses show the only people who actually went to the hospital or died were people like you. They didn't get early treatment. That's a sad statement. If our government would have assisted me and doctors in my circles to treat high-risk people at home, and you were high risk because of this AFib, you had this cardiac history, we wouldn't have had the loss of life.
I had dual-side pneumonia. And what saved me was I got the blood transfusion with antibodies in it, plasma.
Plasma exchange.
So I had a plasma exchange, and then after the plasma exchange, like literally within, I would say, 4 or 5 hours, completely different.
But that's how the monoclonal antibodies work. So with monoclonal antibodies, the first one came out in November of 2020, is bamlanivimab. They're like a miracle. Trump got monoclonal antibodies, by the way, when he got COVID in April of 2020. Do you know there were 6 of these that came out sequentially over time? And within a few weeks, each time the government pulled them off the market.
Really?
And our government bought enough of these monoclonal antibodies, which I used in hundreds of patients. They were safe and effective, but the government pulled them off the market within a few weeks or months.
For what reason?
They said, well, they're probably not going to work because the virus is mutating. We had enough to outfit every nursing home. Every patient who came in the hospital should have gotten them. Now, you were too early to get them. I had it early on, too. But my point is, they were only given to a small fraction of people.
And did it help to those
They
fractions?
survived.
Yes,
So
interesting.
of the 15% of people who got them in the emergency room, they survived. The 85% who didn't, some of those went on to die.
Were you during COVID, you were practicing in Texas?
Yes, still am.
Still am. Okay. Uh, did the hospital in any way encourage you to constantly push people towards vaccination, towards ventilators? Did the hospital have a agenda, or was the hospital told by, the government, these are the steps that you need to take, these are the correct, this is the correct path, or no?
Well, I was on one of the task force for the hospital. I was on the research task force for the pandemic, but all of our early 2020 conference calls and meetings were all about protecting the doctors and nurses.
Okay.
Personal protective equipment, reverse isolation.
PP or yeah, right?
Well, what's wrong with that? And one of the calls, I remember I said, well, wait a minute, are we going to start talking about how we're going to treat the patients? This is all about protecting us.
The doctors and nurses.
Yes, so doctors and nurses were far more concerned with protecting themselves than they were showing interest in treating patients. And we didn't see protocols being developed by Harvard or Mayo Clinic. We didn't see any innovation. There was no hospital in the country that said, we're number one in treating COVID. Send your patients here.
Mm.
We have innovation. We have novel treatments. Not a single one. And these were valuable hospitalizations. The government picked up the tab for all of them. All these hospitals want to be centers of excellence for heart disease or for cancer. Why didn't they want to be any good for COVID?
Okay, interesting. The government paid out to every single hospital the more patients they try to take in,
They were premium paid patients. Even if you were an uninsured patient, you were covered
and the government
through the CARE Act. Yeah.
picked up the tab.
Yeah.
Do they still do that until today or no?
Yes.
So any COVID patient goes to the hospital, the government picks up the tab.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter you have
Yeah.
insurance, you don't have insurance.
Why wouldn't hospitals compete for this business? Why wouldn't they want to be excellent? Do you know, I'm on a standing committee for Arizona in the Senate. The senators ask me, Dr. McCullough, what can we do to get better? This is through the pandemic. What can we do for the next pandemic? I said, why don't you call a roundtable for all the hospitals' CEOs and chief medical officers, and why don't you do comparative statistics? What hospital had the lowest mortality rate, the lowest use of the ventilator rate, best survival? They said, Dr. McCullough, they won't show up.
Interesting. Do you think there was a conspiracy going on from the get-go from the Wuhan lab in China and the American government? Because we were financing that lab.
Well, there's a whole book.
And that's not the only lab we're financing.
Joe, there's whole books written on that. Wonderful book is Deception by Rand Paul. Rand Paul and I, by the way, went to Baylor at the same time.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
I think I saw him
He's
once or
Baylor?
twice. Yeah, he's a Baylor grad, and he was really young, a little tiny guy at the time, as I remember, because I met him just this last year in his chambers in Washington. He goes, we went to Baylor together. I said, you're kidding me. He zipped through in 3 years and got into Duke Medical School and then did ophthalmology, which is a really competitive residency. He's smart as a tack. And anyhow, he had obviously a great career. But he wrote a book called Deception, which from the very beginning, there was a conspiracy. Very beginning. That virus that you got was straight out of that lab.
Wuhan.
It was straight out of that lab. And all the evidence is there. And the spike protein on the surface, the ball is a nucleocapsid, the little spike are those thousands. That spike protein is what injured your lungs. It causes blood clots. It causes damage throughout the body. And as it gets worse and worse and worse, it was designed to be a killer.
So do you think the COVID vaccine, not the vaccine, the COVID, was actually designed on purpose, or was it truly, come from some sort of a animal that, everybody was claiming?
It's clear it was designed on purpose. And
What would be the purpose of that then? Why would we
Purpose-
want America and the entire world to be sick?
because it's the purpose of biolabs. And we have over a dozen of these in the United States. They're all over the world. This is the new power game in the world. You don't hear about nuclear weapons and nuclear proliferation and defense systems, you hear about biolabs. And Biden passed legislation summer of 2024 specifically outlining the whole purpose of this. They're called pathogens of pandemic potential that have a dual purpose. So the purpose is to get the whole world sick
Mhm.
and at the same time create a countermeasure. That's a military term, but now it's used in medicine. Countermeasure, which can be a vaccine, a therapeutic, it can also be protective equipment. But if you hold the threat that can get the whole world sick and you hold the antidote, you hold power.
So who decides, hey, you know what, the world needs a new pandemic? If, what you're saying is true.
What we're told by our government agencies is that, listen, we have to do this. We have to get ahead of nature because there could be another pandemic or another threat from an adversary. So we better be doing this research so we can have the countermeasure. We have entire divisions of government, huge government agencies doing this. So there's one in the NIH called BARDA,
Mhm.
and there's one in the military called DARPA. We're
DARPA,
talking,
yeah.
we're talking billions, thousands of employees. They're doing what's called pandemic response. This is rich stuff. And the companies are all involved in this because they know they can be suppliers. In 2012, DARPA announces a program. It's called the ADEPT P3 program. Still on their website today, Joe. And it says, we will end pandemics in 60 days using messenger RNA vaccines. In 2012. This is 2012. It's still on their website. That was an aspiration that they were going to end a pandemic in 2012.
P3 confronts the reality that Department of Defense, DoD personnel are not only deployed around the world for routine operations, but are often among the first responders to outbreaks of emerging or re-emerging diseases with pandemic potential.
Bingo. Scroll down and look at the figure. They should have a figure here. You can see it. Go up. There's a little life cycle of the messenger RNA
Pandemic
vaccine.
Prevention Platform, P3 program.
P3, yep. There's, I think if you click on one of the links, you'll.
And you're saying this was there since 2012.
2012.
Very interesting.
So, what should President Trump, what should he have said? And what should his, listen, this is DARPA. These guys know they were doing this. What they should have said is, listen, we've been working on this since 2012. We've had this aspiration of using messenger RNA vaccines to end pandemics in 60 days. We've got a pandemic, and we want to tell you, we've been working on this for 8 years. It's not brand new technology. We've been working on this. We believe it's ready. Moderna believes they have a product, and BioNTech and Pfizer. But we shouldn't have been told that this was cooked up overnight.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you next. We were under the impression that these vaccines were actually cooked up in just a matter of weeks, months, right? And all these, professionals, doctors were constantly saying, this can't be right because every single vaccine that's made up, it has to be, tested for about 12 months to 18 months and have a bunch of variants to make sure it actually works. But then in this case, we just came up with a vaccine. Every single, biological tech company, Moderna, Pfizer, and, all those big healthcare companies wanted to make all the money. So they just hurried up, made the vaccine and got paid by the government.
It's amazing we're told this and we accepted it, myself included. So listen, I didn't do my own research. A wonderful book, pull it up, is COVID-19 and the Global Predators. We Are the Prey by Peter Breggin, Breggin. In this book, he outlines since 2003, there have been 36 pandemic preparedness planning events. Planning to 2003. So 2003 is the BioShield Act, which is published in Congress, saying, listen, we're going to get ready for biowarfare. 2005 is the PrEP Act, which says, listen, it's going to happen. And when it happens, there's going to be freedom of from liability and for vaccines.
Is the author?
Yeah, that's the author, but bring up the book, COVID-19 and the Global Prayers. I think it's called We Are that's it. That's click on that light blue book there. I wrote one of the introductions. Listen, 24 of these provide written documents like the acts I've mentioned. 6 of them are filmed. I wasn't paying attention. I don't know about you, but they were filmed. 2017, Gates Foundation and Johns Hopkins
Yeah.
holds a seminar. It's called the SPARS pandemic. It says there's gonna be a coronavirus pandemic in 2017.
Yes.
And this is
I remember.
this is what's gonna happen. There's gonna be confusions over medicines. We're gonna harness all the resources to get the world vaccinated. That's the SPARS pan. They published peer-reviewed papers on this. I wasn't paying attention. Then in 2019, then we have Event 201. And Event 201, we're talking George Gao, the Chinese CDC director. We have Avril Haines, who's the director of national intelligence just before Tulsi Gabbard. She was at the World Economic Forum at the time. All kinds of people come in for that. And they said, there's going to be a coronavirus pandemic. And for sure, we're going to mass vaccinate the world. In fact, Avril Haines and George Gao's breakout is, how do we actually cover up the lab origin of this? That's part of Event 201.
So I want to understand, why did they wait until 2019, 2020? If this has been spoken about, talked about, and researched about since 2003, like you're saying, why that time period? Why not sooner, or why not later?
It's just like nuclear proliferation. You know, you have a nuclear missile, you've got nuclear defense systems. You say, well, why did somebody pull the trigger then? With this lab situation, my review of this is, I think it was a leak. I think it got out unintentionally.
Okay.
Now Johns Hopkins said it's going to happen in 2025. They said they were trying to forecast, and we've published this on my Substack Focal Points. There's been peer-reviewed papers of the biolabs. There's about, again, I think there's 14 in the United States. One's in Galveston, not too far from me in Texas. There's hundreds of leaks. Hundreds of leaks. These labs aren't perfect. People get stuff stuck on them. They drop their mask, or the aeration system, fails. Some people get it.
DARPA prepared it, the labs prepared it, and it was accidentally leaked. That's why everybody got the virus.
That's the best way. I think
It's just speculation.
I think it's speculation. Rand Paul's book, he agrees. He thinks it probably got out of the lab in August of 2019, somewhere around those. They put up Rand Paul's book.
There's a report by Tom pulled it up, but can you zoom in for a second, Tom?
What do you have, Tom?
The report revealed conflicts between the FBI, which supported the lab leak theory with moderate confidence, and other intelligence agencies. Despite a lack of consensus, Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines opted to brief President Joe Biden and top aides only on evidence supporting the
zoonotic theory that it came from the wet market. Listen to this. This is something interesting. So Avril Haines comes from the World Economic Forum. She's at Event 201. So Event 201, the best way we can piece it together, the virus is already on the move. So Event 201 is really kind of a planning meeting. Like, it's going to hit.
Yeah.
It's going to hit. So this is what we're going to do. And the interesting thing about all these things, they're all in the open. This is Event 201. You could just go on YouTube and just watch it. So Avril Haines becomes our Director of National Intelligence. We get to a frustration point. I'm going to say it's like 2023. There's a vote in Congress. It's the only unanimous vote in Congress that I can remember over the last several administrations. They vote unanimously to release all of the Wuhan lab documents so we can see them. Avril Haines has them. She goes, I'm not releasing them.
Interesting.
That wasn't Democrats and Republicans wanted this. She goes, I'm not releasing them. It's a national, security threat if I release them. And so she produces a superficial report. And then everyone's clamoring, in my field, everyone's clamoring for, let's find out what happened, what American state actors were involved, how many more samples are over there. We need to know. Tulsi Gabbard gets in office. No release of the Wuhan documents. We have this really light level summary.
Release. Yeah.
What does Fauci do? Fauci's part of this group. So clearly Ralph Barrick at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance, Fauci, Xingling Li, the bat lady, for sure. There's some other virologists who are probably consultants, Jeremy Farrar at the Wellcome Trust, Edwin Holmes at University of Sydney. Some others are involved. Christian Anderson at Scripps. They, to this day, they're airtight on this. They won't say what happened. Fauci goes to Biden, and this is how clemency works, by the way. You have to ask for it. It wasn't Biden's idea. Fauci went to Biden and said, listen, I need a 10-year pardon. He goes, okay, a preemptive pardon. A preemptive pardon. This is unheard of. A preemptive pardon for a doctor. This is astonishing when you think about this. And Ralph Barrick, in 2021, is on an interview. And they asked him, they said, do you have the code to the virus? Because he had published papers, one in 2015 in Nature Medicine and the other one 2016 Proceedings in Academia Sciences. The title of the paper is A SARS-like CoV-2 Wuhan Institute of Virology 1 virus poised for human emergence. And in these papers, they describe how they created the virus.
This is what year?
This is 2015 and 2016. It's right there. Primordial SARS-CoV-2, the roadmap for it is right there. And at the same time, in these experiments, they're trying to make a vaccine. So perfect dual purpose. Barrick has asked in 2021, are you going to release the code? Because the code, we want to see if it matches what came out of the lab in Wuhan. Because there was a Chinese doctor at Fudong University. Once he got a sample from the lab, he sequenced it like overnight. And so the code of the virus that you got was known. Barrick says, I'm not releasing it. He says, the National Institutes of Health has advised me not to release it because it's a national security
issue. Yeah. The best term everybody uses in government. It's a national security issue.
So you can imagine, what if
the Epstein files are also a national security issue.
There you go. Here you go. So we don't want to relitigate all this, yes. But you saw how dangerous it was. I saw how dangerous it was. We knew that the only hope was early treatment. Remember, in 2020, there was no vaccine. When you and I got it, there was no vaccine.
Yes.
Vaccine wasn't going to save us. Now, it turns out when the vaccine rolled out,
only ventilators were saving people at the time.
Actually, some studies showed the ventilator mortality rate was as high as 90%. Do you know far into the pandemic, there's a paper, I think, from Johns Hopkins, far into the pandemic, in 2023 or so, the ventilator mortality was still 40%. So the ventilator was not saving patients. The McCullough protocol, which became the most widely used treatment platform, on Earth, because I was out promulgating this, and I had a major society behind me. The McCullough protocol is credited with saving worldwide tens of millions of lives and sparing hundreds of millions of hospitalizations. At the Wellness Company, we formed a whole company out of this. We make emergency medical kits with McCullough protocol. The vaccines didn't save a single life. It was early treatment that saved lives. You almost died because you didn't get early treatment.
Yes.
If you would have got early treatment, it would have taken an edge off it, and you would have gotten through.
Would you advise people to continuously take the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, now?
No. I mean, early on, when we saw people dying immediately after the COVID vaccine, I testified in the Texas Senate in March of 2021. That's early. We had about 1,600 vaccine deaths at that time in the United States. 1,600? Imagine if we had 1,600, ibuprofen deaths or something. 1,600? I said, listen, I have to question this.
And the number one thing it causes is blood clot?
The two is heart damage causing cardiac arrest and blood clots. That's proven.
How did they not test the vaccine on any person, on any animal, to see if there's any side effects before just giving it out to the public?
They were rushing through the clinical program and the standard testing. So there's standard cardiotoxicity testing where you just actually tested on some heart muscle cells. That was done, by an independent German lab. And for sure, Pfizer and Moderna are toxic to heart muscle cells. If you do that today, you'd say, no, that drug should not be going into humans. But no, the cardiotoxicity, the genotoxicity, teratogenicity, oncogenicity, biodistribution, none of the testing was done for the COVID-19 vaccines. But listen, we've had 5 years of this. They could have tested it for the boosters, still not done. Moderna's rolled out an RSV vaccine. There's no emergency. They skipped all that testing too.
So you're telling me the current boosters and the current COVID-19 vaccine is identical since its inception? Nobody, retested it, reinvented it, made it better to make sure it doesn't affect.
It has not been made safer. Now, the genetic code for the spike protein has changed from the original Wuhan to some variants. In fact, it's even worse, Joe. The boosters, when they come out, they're not even tested at all in humans. They're just tested in animals to say, well, there's an antibody rise against this spike protein. They wave it off.
You're a very intelligent man. I have a different analogy besides, spreading the virus, and to see how the government can, do this. I want to understand and I want to have your take on this. Do you think there was also an intention to see how the government can control its people, the public, to see how they would react? How far would they push against the government? For instance, having that 10 feet apart, 5 feet apart thing, not going into churches, not going into restaurants, having a bunch of closures, no school, no nothing. Do you think the governments around the world, I'm not speaking only about the United States, are testing to see what would be the reaction of the public? How far would they push just in case if they want to have something bigger, better, more outrageous than COVID-19?
Joe, we didn't talk before we got on the show, but did you just come back from the World Economic Forum?
No, no,
Did you? Come on.
no,
Just tell us the truth.
yeah.
Were you in the crowd?
No, I was not.
You weren't?
No, no,
That's
not
exactly what was said at the World Economic Forum.
really.
It was said the COVID-19 pandemic was a test of global compliance. Compliance. Would you comply with a directive, a government directive? It was a test. And, and things were, we had it pretty easy
And I think we passed the test.
in the United States. So listen, in the United States, we had it pretty easy. Some places, it was rough. I had friends in Paris that said, listen, I've got to get an affidavit to leave my house and get some groceries. I had friends in Australia. Ultimately, I visited Australia. And they said, Doc, we had a 5-kilometer radius around our house. As if the virus is, going to pay attention to, radial divisions. It was a test of global compliance, at least according to the World Economic Forum.
So it's interesting. Why would they just, speak about it so simply
And openly.
and
Well,
openly and
in
put
my
it, into people's minds after the pandemic?
well, listen, in my book, and this was we wrote this in 2021. It was published in 2022. The subtitle here, and this is what I was doing: preventing hospitalization and death while battling the biopharmaceutical complex. So, what is the biopharmaceutical complex? What is this? And in our book, we outline that over time in this era of biological threats and countermeasures, this last decade of rich research, lots of government money, tons of government money, a consortium or a complex or a cartel has formed. And there are powerful players in here. At the top, we think, is the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, Gavi, CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, founded by Gates and World Economic Forum. All the regulatory agencies are involved. So we have the US FDA, the NIH, the CDC. In the UK, we have MHRA. We have SAFRA in South Africa. We have the regulatory group in Australia, the EMA in Europe. They were all carefully coordinated here, and again, richly funded. When I mean richly, do you have any idea how many people work at the US CDC
No,
or what their budget is?
I'm sure it's a massive budget, but I don't know how many people work there.
We're talking, I did my residency at University of Washington in Seattle, one of the top places in the country. Many of my fellow residents became CDC officers. We're talking people equally as competent as I am.
And I assume very well paid?
You know, probably reasonably well paid. But you know how many of them?
No.
12,000
12,000 CDC employees.
CDCs, $9 billion budget.
That's a big budget, yeah.
Now, they don't take care of any patients. They don't run any hospitals. They largely are there to give me advice as a doctor.
Centers for
guidelines.
Disease Control.
Can you imagine that? $9 billion, 12,000 employees to give some advice? This is mind-boggling.
Maybe you chose the wrong profession.
No, but this is mind-boggling. Well, they do some outbreak investigation, and they have some in vitro diagnostics. I want to be fair to them. They're very smart people. But there's something up here. We describe in our book, if you put the WHO, and the WHO is bigger than the CDC, and all these other organizations, we're talking trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars. CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, is one of the best to look at. Look up CEPI if you can. They have a business plan. The business plan says there will be one pandemic after another. They wrote it in 2017. And for each one of these pandemics, there's going to be one answer: global mass vaccination. They're in the business of vaccination. CEPI, they are preparing for future pandemics. They don't even give a shot at treatment. The only answer is going to be a vaccine.
In your estimation, when do you think we'll have another pandemic like this? Or another outbreak, massive outbreak?
Anthony Fauci, Ashish Jha, who is a former White House coordinator, Peter Hotez, Baylor at Houston, Jeremy Farrar, who was at the Wellcome Trust, now he's the chief scientist at WHO. They all say, CEPI says it's imminent. It's imminent. In fact, look up CEPI Disease X. They call it Disease X. I said, listen, it's going to happen. We're just going to call it Disease X right now and get ready for it. Because there are so many biolabs making these creatures, these pathogens, it's a matter of months or years before another one comes out.
So you think there's going to be another leak?
For sure.
Okay.
Either leak or, if a nefarious...
X, there you go.
There's Disease X.
You know, interesting. Can you look at that logo to your right? That's an interesting logo.
Don't go there. Don't. You're going to do cryptography? No.
I mean, I'm looking at this logo for the very first time, and instantly, like this, that's just what's sparking into my mind. It doesn't look very lighthearted.
Are you saying it looks evil?
It looks demonic. That's what it looks to me.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
listen, there's some iconography here, and this is a New York Times bestseller. Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. Look at the coin, Joe.
The Vatican, okay.
This is a 20-euro coin issued by the Vatican in 2022.
Okay, here for
a real coin.
For everybody who can't
real
see
coin.
it here, you guys can take a look at it.
It's a boy
with a mask on, with
the
a
mask.
nurse.
He's about to receive the Eucharist. This is the classic tripartite configuration.
He's getting vaccines.
Instead of receiving the Holy Communion, he's getting a vaccine. What does this tell you? The vaccine replaces God. The vaccine is the Savior, not Jesus Christ. There is an ideology here. When people, the whole world has gone nuts about vaccines in the last 5 years. And zealots, people proponents of vaccines, they have taken on essentially a false religion. It's been building for 300 years. We chronicle every bit of it.
I want to understand, even though every country, especially the U.S., has been a massive proponent of vaccination since the inception of birth. Since a child is born, immediately they're vaccinated. When I was born, I got maybe 3-4 vaccines. When my kids were born, they got from day one, they got 10 or something like this.
Yeah.
And that's from the day they were born. I'm speaking, I got 4 or 5 throughout my lifetime until I was 18 or something like this. And now RFK is in power. Okay. And he's a super anti-vaxxer. And in recent times, he's been a big proponent of trying to be less vaccinated in America. But if you're saying what is true, that we're constantly going more vaccine, how can they let him be part of that important institution, okay, in America, and make sure he disallows more vaccinations in America. I want to understand that part.
Well, I mean, how could, how is the intelligence community handling Trump, for instance? The government is so big now. Do you know something like 22% of Americans are employed by government, either federal or state? It's huge.
Yeah,
It's
that's a big
huge.
number.
It's huge. And when you have lifetime government employees, who is ever in the current administration, that's just 4 years.
Okay.
And I think a lot of these career people, let's just say in the medical CDC, NIH, FDA, I figured, listen, Kennedy's in there. We can wait him out for 4 years.
I see.
Jay Bhattacharya at the National Institutes of Health, they said we can wait him out. And you know how long it takes to get a meeting with these people, let alone actually do anything?
Yeah.
I don't think. What'd you come up
We're
with
talking
there?
about the American workforce that's employed by the US government, both
Oh, I
local and
overestimated
federal,
14 to
14,
15%. Thank
15%.
you.
But yeah, you're close.
Yeah, I
But
overestimated. It seems like everybody, but 14 to
yeah,
15%. And the point is, there's a giant biomedical deep state. It doesn't matter who's the secretary of HHS. Look, Kennedy's in there. I know Kennedy personally. He knows the COVID vaccines are deadly. He's got the power to pull them off the market.
but he's not. He's letting it stay.
Listen, there's all kinds of things. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, I know him as well. There's been zero research commissioned to help these people who've had blood clots and heart damage from the COVID vaccines. Zero.
So you're telling me they're just gonna wait out and the next secretary comes in and whatever was taken out will be brought back in or substituted
Well,
or
do we see that when we have one president from one party comes in and there's all these changes, and the very first thing the next president does is undo all the changes?
exactly. Yeah. By executive order.
Yeah.
Unless it's passed by law, by Congress, the US Senate, and
So we're in a situation, and I think you and I have settled on this. The government cannot determine our medical destiny. The government cannot be your guardian for your health care. It can't. You have to take matters into your own hands.
you're absolutely right. But then we as, the public, when we go and see our physicians in that specific, place and location, they are the authority, kind of, because I don't understand medicine.
I
I'm
don't think I think you're pretty smart.
I'm not a doctor, right? So if I go and see my doctor, Dr. Ara Shafrazian, and he tells me, you know what, hey, this is what needs to be done. This is the right path. This is the right medication. Am I supposed to question him? Do I question his authority? Or if I go to the hospital, let me tell you an incident that happened to me once. I went to the ER right after my maybe 6 or 7 months after my ablation. My heart started hurting me. My left arm was hurting. Those are all the signs of possible a stroke or, a heart attack, right? You're a cardiologist. Uh, and I went to the ER, and then this ER physician said, "You're having a stroke." I said, "Okay." He said, "We need to perform a thing, go inside your arteries and see if they're clotted." I said, "Okay, let's do it." And I did not know at the time. And then I go and see my regular cardiologist, Dr. Eric Lee, and he says, you know what? That cardiologist has a massive reputation of, putting people into fear and trying to make a quick buck. Because, when he does an angiogram, it's just like, I don't know, a mechanic changing an oil. That's how it is for him. It's just like instant, make a quick buck. But he put fear into me. But I am supposed to trust that physician. He took an oath when he got his license when he graduated school, correct? That's what everybody does, just like a lawyer, just like a doctor, just like a politician. And, you're telling us, hey, you have to take care of your own self. You have to be your doctor, kind of a deal.
No, not that. You have to do your own research. You have to have good common sense. And remember, this applies to everything. You use the example of a car mechanic. Come on, these guys get their licenses. The plumbers get their licenses. You take your car in and it's running pretty good, and the mechanic says, You need a new transmission.
Yeah, I don't know if you know.
You use your common sense, and then what do? You get a second opinion. And so listen, I know you didn't have it. I know you were in duress. You're kind of on your back,
Yeah, exactly.
naked,
Exactly.
under an exam gown. But what we've learned, and actually great credit to Senator Ron Johnson, who I think is an American hero. Through COVID, he said, listen, this doesn't make sense. I want to call in some experts. Let me call Dr. McCullough. Let me call some other experts in. Let's have a second opinion.
Hmm.
And we actually named some of our Senate hearings on this to get some second opinions. And my opinion was strongly, listen, the government approach of doing nothing and waiting till you go in the hospital is not good. It doesn't pass the sniff test. It's not common sense to do this. We don't let any pneumonia get that bad to have people come in the hospital. Treat early. And that's the reason why we devised protocols. We tested them the best we could, and we went with it. And when the COVID vaccines rolled out, and at the time, I was, by invitation, I was writing op-eds in The Hill, which is widely read by all Washington insiders. And Scott Atlas from Harvard was writing largely on masking and contagion control. I was at Baylor at the time, and I wrote about how the virus was spreading, early treatment. And then in August of 2020, now this is 4 months before the vaccines come out, I published an op-ed in The Hill, still on their website today. It's called The Great Gamble of the COVID-19 Vaccine Development Program. Joe, you're talking to the only public figure in the world in writing who questioned these vaccines. You can't find another piece on this.
So were medical professionals, weren't supposed to question authority?
No one did. This is interesting. I'm talking the world's a big place. There's a lot of doctors. There's a lot of health officials.
That's the op-ed you're talking about.
Yeah, click on The Great Gamble there.
Operation Warp Speed and
Yeah, you can pull it up. No, it's to the left. Anyhow, I don't want to. Oh, you got it. Yeah, Great Gamble. Okay, you're talking to the only human mind in the world who did this. Robert F. Kennedy didn't do this.
yeah.
The chief of medicine at Mayo Clinic did this. Harvard. No one but me.
Yeah.
No one but me. Nobody in Russia. Nobody in Indonesia. Nobody in France. Nobody in the UK. Why? Why could I see this as a gamble and they couldn't? I think the world was overcome with fear. They really were. This is August of 2020. And then people were seduced. The seduction of a brand new high-tech vaccine that was going to save humanity, and the way it was discussed and the way it was presented, it was going to have no side effects. The initial studies were overwhelmingly positive, over 90% efficacy. When the trucks rolled out from Pfizer, people were on the side of the road clapping. I mean, this is, in my book, there's a similar analogy to this. This happened during polio. And when the polio vaccines rolled out in the mid-20th century, the same thing. The world was ready to be saved by a vaccine.
But also people were in fear,
And it was fear.
which is the biggest form of control.
Well, it's control, but not only that, but this idea of acceptance. If you're going to accept something and you're fearful, and then you're told it's so good and it's so safe, and take it to save somebody else, do the right thing. This is for humanity. And even if you went through it, even if you had COVID, Joe, take a vaccine. You had COVID in 2020, so did I. Did people tell you to take a vaccine?
No, there was no vaccine at the time.
I know, but later on.
Oh yeah, constantly.
Oh, wait a minute, you already had the virus.
It doesn't matter. I mean, doesn't matter. They constantly push for more vaccination.
Take vaccine.
Not even only vaccination, booster after booster. There's a new booster. There's another booster.
Right. Do you know President Biden, I counted up, publicly took 6 of them?
Yeah, I know. I saw the images.
6 of them?
Yeah.
So
Maybe that's after that he became the auto pen.
well, listen, I think Biden, I said it publicly, I think Biden has 2 vaccine injuries. He has a blend of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and the neurocognitive syndromes, and I've treated thousands of patients. I'm one of the most published people in the world on this. From the vaccines, the neurocognitive syndromes are not classical. It's not classic Alzheimer's. It's not classic Parkinson's. It's a blend. And he's got something else.
So you're saying there's a possibility of him having that blend after the vaccination?
Yeah, or markedly accelerated. Markedly. He changed dramatically. Dramatically.
He changed.
His face became blank. Did you see the way he walked? He kind of stumbled forward.
Absolutely. He fell off.
And he
a few
developed
times.
another problem, Joe. Turbo cancer.
What's
Listen,
that?
turbo cancer. Listen, I take care of patients all day long, internal medicine and cardiology. I've never let a patient under my watch develop widely metastatic prostate cancer and somehow miss it. It's never happened.
Mhm.
How can he get the best care in the world from the White House doctor
And
and say, oh, surprise, you've got widely metastatic, high-grade prostate cancer that's already out of the prostate into the spine and the pelvis?
yeah, that's a great question. I don't know.
There are now hundreds of papers published. In a recent review by Wafik El-Dari, I just had him on my show from Brown University, indicates that the spike protein that we get from the infection, and we certainly get a ton of it from the vaccines, probably inhibits tumor suppressor factors and allows cancers to take off, become these rapidly progressive cancers. The messenger RNA may actually be oncogenic. The contaminants, SV40, and that may be, these may be cancer-causing vaccines. This is what I'm telling you. And the literature is starting to suggest this. Boy, Robert F. Kennedy and Jay Bhattacharya and Marty McCreary, they better light a fire if 81% of Americans took a vaccine that could raise their cancer risks. No one in Washington is showing any concern.
Is there a vaccine you would say it's okay to take?
Every vaccine has what we call clinical indications and medical necessity. Now, as we sit here today, drinking clean water, having good, management of water, wastewater, clean air, good nutrition, what have you, there's not a single vaccine that's medically compelling or clinically indicated. I mean, polio hasn't been in the water supply
Forever.
for decades.
Yeah.
And, on top of that, when the polio vaccine, and this is in the vaccines mythology, ideology, and reality, we have every bit of history here. When the polio vaccines were tested in the Salk field trials, 1.8 million kids were tested. This is a huge study.
Yeah, that's it.
There was a few hundred cases of polio. That's it. And the vaccines were only about 60 to 70% protective.
So they're only 60% effective.
It's not perfect.
Yeah.
So the polio vaccine did not make polio go away. It's better living conditions, sanitation, nutrition, hygiene.
Of everything.
Right. So with all the vaccines, there's a trade-off. Now, the reality of vaccines is, for sure, the measles vaccine dropped the case count of measles, for sure. The chickenpox vaccine dropped the case count of chickenpox. But for every vaccine, there's also a downside. So what we've learned, the McCullough Foundation just put out kind of the definitive report that I think that influenced things more in Washington, far more than what RFK has done. McCullough Foundation report was published October 27th of 2025. The title of it was Determinants of Autism Spectrum Disorder. We did a deep dive into what is behind this autism epidemic. Do any of your kids have autism?
Thank God, no.
Me neither. But here in California,
Massive.
5% of families are suffering with this.
Yes.
How's that? 27% the kids have profound autism. Profound autism is worse than polio. They are more disabled. The kid with polio, I have people with polio in my practice. Mentally, they're fine. They may have a physical limitation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Profound autism, there's actually more profound autism, and it's worse than polio. And we document it in our book. But the point is, what's the downside of the measles vaccine? Well, it's probably measles with all the other vaccines combined in a susceptible child is probably a risk factor for the development of autism.
So there's a hard correlation between vaccines.
It's a risk factor. It's a risk factor. Again, if there are predisposing factor, genetics, other prenatal factors, for instance, Does every kid get autism? No.
Yes, yeah.
But listen, 5% in California is way too high. When you and I were kids, near zero. Near zero. Do you remember any autistic
No, I
kids?
don't. I don't remember in
I don't remember
school.
any.
I mean,
Okay. So
actually, I remember when I immigrated to the States, but back there in Russia when I went to school, I don't
you
remember
remember any
anybody with
kids?
yeah.
I grew up in the States in the 60s. I don't remember any. But the point is, so measles vaccine, well, if it's part of this bundle, it's not just autism that's skyrocketing. It's ADHD.
Oh, big,
Okay, and there's a
massive
big
numbers.
overlap.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
something like 15% of kids have ADHD, and the overlap is maybe 10% of that 15% have autism. Of kids who have autism, it's like a third have ADHD. Um, but it's also tics, these involuntary facial
Yeah.
movements, and seizures, epilepsy.
Yes.
And it's probably a post-encephalitic problem where there's brain inflammation from a big bundle of vaccines. And by the way, 20 vaccines say in the package insert, it causes encephalitis. It causes brain inflammation.
It's
Well,
written.
it's in the package insert. Yeah, well, you get brain inflammation, you can end up having seizures afterwards. You can end up having autism. The other thing that's wildly epidemic is allergic diseases, food allergies in
Oh,
these kids.
my kids have that. My kids are super allergic to eggs, nuts, and fish.
Where did that come from?
I
Do you see any of that in Russia?
no, and none
No,
of us in our family had it.
no. So allergic diseases, asthma, allergic dermatitis, these food allergies. So that's the reason why there's been activism by all kinds of organizations putting pressure on the government, saying, "Listen, these vaccines is probably too much." When you and I, it was just a few vaccines. We got up to over 93 shots in these kids, and starting the first day of life, Kennedy, was at the Children's Health Defense. But again, he seemed powerless to do anything about this. There was this vaccine committee, and the new committee, the best they could do is say, well, maybe don't give the hepatitis B shot on the first day of life. And finally, we produced this report. We sent it to the White House. We sent it to RFK. We sent it to Jim O'Neill, HHS. I know all these people. I said, listen, here's the evidence. It's not looking good. Within 19 days of us sending our report, the CDC in the middle of the night changes its statements on the website and says, we can't rule out vaccines and autism. 19 days.
Wow.
So that shows the power of independent
Research.
research. The government wasn't, the CDC could have done this report. They got $9 billion, 12,000 smart employees. They can't do a report on autism. We did it. But it doesn't stop there. The committee and RFK still kind of really don't do anything. All these vaccines are still being given. And finally, Trump, within 90 days of our report, Trump basically tells Jim O'Neill, Trump's not a medicine guy. Jim O'Neill's a former Palantir tech. He's not a medical guy. Trump goes, trim the schedule. Just trim it. And Jim O'Neill comes out and says, I trimmed the schedule. It's going to look like Denmark. We went from 17 vaccine-preventable diseases to 11. We're cutting 55 doses off. By the way, Denmark has better control over infectious diseases than we do. So, and Denmark doesn't even vaccinate for chickenpox. They just let the kids get it. So, things are changing. We've made a big impact.
So it's going towards the better.
Going to the better. There's 12 studies that we've outlined that a healthy child born today is healthier if they take no vaccines whatsoever. None. You have almost zero chance of having food allergies or asthma or autism or any of these
But
problems.
what can these parents do, in order for their kids not to take any vaccines? Because, the education system or local and state
It
government
varies. Listen,
doesn't allow. And they even took out the religious argument where
but
in California I'm talking about.
Joe, listen, California is about as big as Texas. Now, I'm from Texas. Nothing's as big as Texas, but you guys are pretty big.
Yeah.
But we're the same people. The diseases are the same. In California, you're effectively forced into having your kids take these shots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Texas, you go online, you print out an exemption form, you fill it out and say, I don't want my kids to take any vaccines. You get it notarized, you put it on file, you're good.
Wow.
So in Texas, we have medical, religious, and philosophical exemptions. So here's the question on the table, Joe. If the people are the same, and the diseases are the same.
How can there be so much variance?
Why is there such a dramatic? That has to tell you vaccines must be political. That's the only explanation. Texas is kind of more of a red state, and California is blue.
I want
There's no other explanation. It must be political.
I want to understand you've been mentioning the Gates Foundation on multiple occasions, but you're not the only, medical professional out there. There's so many people out there in America, on the internet, in the world, constantly mentioning his name and his correlation to vaccination. Why is he so involved in trying to vaccine the entire world?
We have a lot of um, text dedicated to Bill Gates in my first book. Bill Gates is what we call a philanthrocapitalist. Philanthrocapitalist. Now remember, he went all the way in the late 1990s. He was deep in trouble in court.
With Microsoft and with the
Microsoft and
monopoly.
Netscape and Monopoly, what have you. So essentially, and he was found to be wrong.
Mhm.
So this idea of control and being an oligarch and controlling things is part of him. And if you also watch the film of him when he was really rattled in court, he had many autistic features. You could just
Mm.
yeah. Gates goes and says, "Okay, I'm taking all my money and I'm gonna form a foundation." Now, does this foundation help people and do things? Ostensibly, it does, but it invests. He was an early strategic investor in BioNTech, which made the vaccine for Pfizer, and his foundation made zillions on it. So he's capitalized on this. He's had stated aspirations to mass vaccinate the world.
For what reason? That's what I want to
What he
understand.
said on film, he said, "Listen, out of anything I've done financially, vaccines can bring an investment, a return on investment of 20 times higher than anything I
So
can
this
do."
is all about money. What about the constant rhetoric about depopulation?
I can't comment on it. I haven't studied it that carefully. I mean, I can tell you, well, let's take the World Economic Forum, of which Gates goes there, but Trump was there recently as well. Um, One of the more junior guys that really disturbs a lot of people, his name is Yuval Harari. Uh, he stated that there's too many useless eaters in the world. Now, Klaus Schwab,
Yeah.
in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, and in COVID-19, The Great Reset, he intimates that, that there are too many people in the world. The world can actually have a smaller population to be more efficient, and that we don't change the environment anymore. We can actually change the humans. So, in these books, there's a strong theme of transhumanism. Now, I analyzed the World Economic Forum schedule of events, and I asked you if you were there, and you kind of said you weren't. I was a little suspicious. It actually costs a fortune to go, by the way. Um, but I analyzed this schedule one year. Around 20% of what they talked about was economics. Wait, this is the World Economic Forum. How come economics isn't much of a discussion point? They are interested in all this stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah.
They're super interested in the biopharmaceutical complex. They're super interested in genetics, world population, agriculture. And I do know one person who went to the World Economic Forum. And I asked her, I said, what are they really interested in? He said, well, it's a lot of people who are very wealthy. And these wealthy people, she said, almost 201, they want to live forever. They want
Mortality.
immortality. And this is, this is kind of diabolical to talk this way. But these people now wield tremendous power. In the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a huge shift of money from relatively poorer people to even richer people getting richer.
You,
That's
do you think technology and medicine will evolve that much for immortality to exist?
Oh, that's a fun question. Did your parents go to the weight room and go jogging outside when they were in their 60s or 70s?
No.
Neither did mine. My grandmother made it to age 99, and I don't think she intentionally did anything
To live that long.
to live a healthy life. My dad he was a hard drinking, hard smoking man. He made it to 83. Now, I think he could have made it to 99 if he would have not had those habits.
Mhm.
My mom, I just saw mom yesterday. She hasn't done anything really intentionally in terms of diet, fitness, or anything else, and she's 87. Now listen, I'm 63.
You guys have great genes then.
I'm 63. I stretch. I lift weights. I ran this morning. I don't drink a drop of alcohol. I never smoked a cigarette. We don't know how the point I'm making is we don't know how long someone really can live right now without a lot of assistive stuff.
But can't you argue that when your parents were growing up and they lived until, you said your grandma lived until 99, your mom is 87, their lifestyles were completely different than the lifestyles that we have right now. They didn't have as much credit card debt as we have now. They they
Okay.
they didn't work as much as we are working now. Most women were
I agree with
home
that.
takers, they were mothers, they were
Mhm.
housewives. And food was much, much organic than it is right now. There wasn't as many hormones and preservatives in every single food. Cigarettes, tobacco was just pure natural tobacco. Now you're smoking poison. You know, Alcohol. People used to drink more alcohol back then than they are drinking now. Alcohol stocks have significantly gone
Yeah,
down.
alcohol's going out. Yeah.
Gen Z is not drinking. They're
Yeah.
like against alcohol. But I can almost assume and predict that our mortality rate is gonna go down. The living age, I think what is it right now? 70, 76, 70 something.
Listen, we hit 80. You're right. We hit 80, I believe, for most everybody, and we've gone down the last few years now. COVID played a role. You didn't mention it, but I thought you were. The big difference. Listen, when I went into practice, 1980s, early 1990s, 10% of the population was obese. So when I examined somebody, I could actually hear their heart. I could feel
You're
their liver. Obesity.
the massive problem America has right
But,
now.
I tell you, the last 3 years, obesity crested and has gone down a little bit, so we don't know. So I think on a population perspective, I totally agree. I think we're gonna actually retrench a bit on this average population lifespan. Um, but we don't know somebody who's really, really on their game, how long they can live. And don't forget there's a health span, and then there's lifespan.
Yes.
Health span is how long do you live where you're actually really,
Healthy.
you look as good as you do, Joe, and you're just, on your game. And then that period of time at the end, you're no longer healthy, but you're just hanging on. You're in a senior home or whatever.
Yes.
Do you know how long it is from health span to lifespan?
No.
11 years.
Okay.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So you're telling me from the health span, which is the 11-year mark you're talking about, from the very beginning until they die, it's an 11-year
On
mark
average.
where people live and they're already unhealthy, they're just barely making it, they
Yeah.
need assistance.
Yeah.
And that's what my grandfather always said. He said, the day that I'm unable to use the restroom by myself, I don't want to live.
Go out in a flame of glory.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I before we end, I have to tell you, I think I'm holding in my hand product of the decade. Product of the decade. Out of the pandemic, probably the brightest thing that's happened is the formation of the wellness company. And in 2022, we got together, have a wonderful visionary leader, Foster Colson from Canada, brilliant CEO, Peter Galuli, myself and some other doctors. Harvey Risch was in my group at Fox News. I was a frequent contributor on Fox News. Kelly Victory, she's been a former chief medical officer from, Fortune 500 companies. Drew Pinsky, Dr. Drew, yeah, he's here in LA. Actually, he actually lives close by here. Um, a terrific team, Jim Thorpe, Alex Diaz. We formed the wellness company. And we said, you know what? Never again will we have this pandemic where people can't get their drugs. They can't get a hold of a doctor. They can't get second opinions. We formed a global company. We have had, first 6 months was a period of time when you're starting up where you're not, profitable. After that, we've had, gosh, 33 months of continuous profitability, accelerating. The Ultimate Spike Detox, which I think is product of the century, this is a medicinal grade, a high dose nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. It's the only thing that has scientific support, and my clinical experience tells me that helps get that spike protein out of your body. I had it in 2020. I still had it in my body. I guarantee you have it in your body. That spike protein was devised in that Chinese lab. We've covered it. It gets in our cells. It causes blood clots. It causes heart damage. It may reduce our longevity. It may promote dementia. It may promote cancer.
Can you tell them where they can find that?
Go to twc.health/focal points. twc.health/focal points. I needed a year of this to get my blood test, my spike levels down, the spike antibodies. You should check your test.
I would, yeah.
Very important. This is a blood test. It's so needed right now that our big lab company in the United States, one of them, LabCorp, is now open to the public. You don't even need a doctor. Go to LabCorp, Labs on Demand, infectious diseases, COVID antibody test, sign up, give your user ID and password, sign up, pay $69, go to LabCorp and get your spike test. Your spike antibody test, if you're below 1,000, you're free and clear. Now listen, it's been 6 years since you were sick. I hope you're below 1,000. I wasn't. If you're over 1,000, that's too high. Over 5,000, we start to see spike in the bloodstream when we do research. And if you're at 10,000, 15,000, 25,000, you're in trouble. That's when we've seen cardiac arrests. There still are cardiac arrests. One of my fellow cardiologists, my age at Baylor, sadly, end of 2024, sudden death.
Vaccinated or no?
Yeah. And we've seen, many, many people who've taken the vaccine who've had trouble, whether people come forward and tell the truth or not. And we see all kinds of examples. I mentioned Joe Biden. The list goes on and on. My favorite sports announcer, Kirk Herbstreit, he had COVID in 2020. You know, Kirk, he takes the vaccines. He gets blood clots. He's shooting to the lungs. He almost died. It's like, no, don't take a shot that causes blood clots after you've had COVID. So did Al Roker, my favorite weatherman. He had blood clots. Justin Bieber took it. He developed a classic vaccine syndrome called Ramsay Hunt that paralyzed his face. Dianne Feinstein, she was here in California. She developed the neuroinvasive. She died of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she died. Dianne Feinstein died of that. Justin Bieber's wife, Hailey Bieber, develops a blood clot. It goes to the brain. They have to pull the blood clot out of the brain. Deion Sanders, former Dallas Cowboy great, he gets blood clots, has multiple amputations, doesn't recognize it's the vaccine. Then what happens? He gets better. He's actually a pretty decent coach at Colorado. He develops turbo cancer of the bladder. He gets his entire bladder taken out. He's younger than I am, Joe. I've never had a patient develop a bladder cancer that's that aggressive that we have to take the bladder out in his 50s.
It's so interesting because after COVID, there were so many athletes while they are playing a game, sudden heart attack, dead, or some
That
of
was
them
acute myocarditis. Now, once we got through that, the last one that's notable was Damar Hamlin of Buffalo Bills. Remember when they were playing the Broncos? He has a cardiac arrest. And I'm watching the whole thing. In fact, one of my friends is at the stadium, so we're texting. He's noting everything. And Tucker Carlson calls, and Tucker says, I got to have you on my show. You've got to tell me what's going on. And Mark Siegel, who's in my group at Fox, Mark's like, well, we need to get a GoFundMe. He's not going to make it. We need to help his wife. And all these other people saying, he's dead. He's brain dead. And I went on Fox News, and I told Tucker, I said, listen, I'm a cardiologist. I deal with this, not infrequently. And I need to know one thing. Did he take the COVID vaccine?
Yeah.
Because likely that set him up for this. It wasn't making a hard tackle. I had ruled that out. I said, but I'm going to say something else. National TV. He's going to wake up and he's going to walk out of this hospital and he's going to be fine.
Bold statement.
Everyone said, Dr. McCullough, how do you know that? I said, well, part of it is I know because I've published a lot on this early on about cardiac arrest research, and he had a short resuscitation time. He had every factor that told me he was going to have a good prognosis, but I had some inside information.
Oh,
And you know what it was? when they got out there right away, they shocked him, but he did, kind of regurgitate. He had just had some Gatorade, so he's some fluid, so it went down his lungs, so that's the reason why he had to be on the ventilator for a day. Anyhow, they got him on the paramedic unit, and then they got into the tunnel, and I was texting my friend, I said, "They must be hauling to Cincinnati Hospital." They go, "They're not. They're waiting in the tunnel." I said, "They never wait in the tunnel." The paramedics never wait
Yeah.
in a full-blown cardiac arrest. They go lights and sirens all the way, right? And they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And I was going, "Chris, what is going on?" He said, "Oh," he goes, "I finally figured out why they waited so long. They're waiting to get his mom out of the stands and get her on the rig." And I said, "That told me he's perfectly
Yeah.
stable. He's got a heart rate, he's got a blood pressure, he's responding to commands, he's perfectly stable. And if you're that stable after a
Yeah.
cardiac arrest, you're in the ambulance business, you know this, you're gonna survive."
They did an EKG right on
Oh,
the
yeah,
spot, and
yeah,
they
yeah,
found
yeah.
out what's going on.
And it turned out they probably didn't find much of anything, and what we found, and I've published on this, he had vaccine myopercarditis. It was a trigger for a cardiac arrest. Myself and Michael Goodkin, another cardiologist, we wrote the Bills doctors, we wrote the Buffalo Evening News. We said, "Listen, get on McCullough protocol. This is McCullough protocol, base spike protein detoxification, one prescription drug called colchicine, and I bet he doesn't need a defibrillator, and I bet he can go back to play."
Dr.
And
McCullough,
sure enough,
what can we do in order for medicine not to be a business anymore?
well, most of us who went into medicine, we love science, we wanna help people, and, doctors are reasonably paid, but they're not the highest paid people. We
They're
can't
not, no.
we're not. Hey, listen, you wanna be an Armenian entrepreneur? Now we're talking money. You guys know about money. We're not in money. So doctors deserve to make money. But when doctors work for corporations, and corporations then have to follow, government guidelines for everything, the government then becomes the dictator over healthcare, and that's what happened in COVID. The beautiful thing about medicine and law and plumbing and auto mechanics is to get independent opinions,
Mm.
get different opinions. I'm in complete independent practice in Dallas, Texas. People fly from all over the world to see me, and I give an independent opinion. Always get second and third opinions.
But I wanna understand, what I'm specifically asking is, when somebody goes to the ER just like me, and there's so many of us out there, especially in my community, Armenians have a massive problem with their hearts, their cardiovascular
I think
system.
you're Armenians. You guys like your cigars and you like a little scotch or something, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Ooh.
A lot of us are smokers and occasional drinkers, and we like to live life.
I know what you ask. The bottom line is you wanna stay out of the hospital because 90% of people in the hospital got there under duress. And when you're under duress, you can't shop around and get different opinions. But when you're well, you can come see me, you can see your doctor, you can get different opinions.
You're right. I understand
Yeah.
that fact, but I want to understand, why are the physicians treating us, the patients, as just numbers? Okay, one is here, two is here, three is here. Just get them out.
Okay,
Get them out.
that
Next. Get them
but
out.
Joe,
Next.
that's part of the problem.
I need another bed. Open
That
up the bed.
that's part of the problem. That's that corporatization of medicine. When I was at Baylor, I changed from one group to another group, but I was down people were flying over the world to see me, right? I mean, if you Google me, I probably actually have more Google profiles than any doctor in the world right now.
Well, you're one of the most published cardiologists in the
Yeah,
world.
and certainly, the most published on this whole clinical aspect of COVID-19, and we formed a whole company on it. And, I testified in Congress. I said, "Listen, I'm not just critiquing the government. I am providing solutions that we're not seeing from Harvard and Mayo Clinic or UCLA or anywhere else." I mean, nobody has any answers.
Mhm.
The point I'm making is that in the corporatization of medicine, I was down to 15-minute visits. The nurses would take 8. I'd have 7. Because the corporate it's like working on a conveyor belt. I'm completely in independent practice now. I schedule everybody an hour, an hour of talking.
Wow.
That's the difference. We have to get back to independent practice. People wanna pay for that. You pay a little bit more, get some time. I give every patient my cell phone. While I was waiting around for this podcast, I was over in the hotel across the street. managing a bazillion phone calls with patients because they have my cell phone. And I was helping. I had a patient in Puerto Rico who got messed up on their
Can
medicines,
I
and
have your cell phone?
you can have my cell phone.
Dr. McCullough, thank you so
You're a
much.
great guy.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Love you.